Hospitality, travel, and tourism have been the hardest hit industries during COVID-19. For the state, it's a $7.4 billion economic engine with hundreds of thousands of jobs. The state's most populous county, Pulaski, accounts for about 25% of the entire state's travel and tourism economy. And here's how the capital county has been impacted from mid-March to the 1st of August. Check out these stats. Little Rock hotel revenue down 58%. Food tax collections down more than 30% in April and May, but only down 9.6% in July. Convention and facilities cancellations totaling 316 and counting, with a total economic impact so far of $36.3 million. I sat down with Gretchen Hall, CEO of the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, for her reflections on recent months and how she plans to navigate going forward. Let's talk about the environment that you guys are having to survive in right now. How quickly did it happen in terms of the drop off, and how brutal has it been? Has it been as bad as you thought it would be?
Maybe worse. You know, when we first went into this, your first question was how quickly did it happen? Almost overnight. We went from having the most events on our books in any calendar year going into 2020, after having an fabulous 2019 as far as just tourism numbers go. We had a great January and February, and we were marching along in March, early March. And literally within about 48 hours after COVID started in the state of Arkansas, we had hundreds of event cancellations, and it just went from having busy facilities to having very dark facilities. And at that point, we didn't really have a clue how long this was going to last, and so it has lingered much longer than any of us anticipated, and it has been brutal.
Yeah, I think, and I'll speak in generalities here, I mean, tourism is about a $7.4 billion industry in the state of Arkansas, and Pulaski County is about 25% of that, so a little under $2 billion for here in the central Arkansas region specifically. The fact that you don't know how long it could last, I mean, that uncertainty to me is one of the biggest challenges, because how do you pivot? What can you pivot to? Tell me where you're finding some opportunities.
Sure. So our immediate pivot was, how do we mitigate expenses? How do we reduce any of those variable expenses that we can, knowing that our revenue is going to drastically decrease because of this? Not only our tax revenue from a tourism standpoint, but also our facility revenue on the rental side. So first and foremost, it was trying to figure out how to mitigate expenses. Then it's trying to figure out what is this temporary normal, and how do we provide services for our industry for survival. A lot of that has been pivoted toward the advocacy side. It's working with Congress on some of these care packages in order to provide support and relief and some stimulus money to our industry specifically in order for them to survive this. And then the third component is really following some of the research and figuring out what the new normal coming out of this is going to be, and how we can target specific industries, and how we can maximize what Little Rock and the state of Arkansas has to offer from a tourism standpoint in order to be fully prepared when the recovery actually happens.
Well, let's talk about all three of those pieces there a little bit more in depth. So let's go first to mitigating expenses right there. Can facilities like Robinson Center that you had to finance for the big renovation, the convention center itself, things like Simmons Bank Arena, can those entities, how are they coping with the note payments that they have to make with the loss of the revenue? Is it getting deferred, or how are you coping with that?
Sure. So our Robinson Center renovation was funded by a 30-year bond payment. There is no deferral on that bond payment, so we have to find a way to make those payments. It's about a $4 million expenditure per year. Thankfully, we have reserves in the bank, and we are still making some revenue. It is drastically decreased, but we have to make sure that that bond payment can be made, because if we default on that bond payment, it could greatly affect the city of Little Rock's bonding capacity for future initiatives. And so we certainly have protected that first and foremost. It is not in risk. We have the funds to do that. And a lot of that is attributed to our restaurant tax. So our primary funding funding sources come from a lodging tax, which has been greatly diminished during this COVID transition, our restaurant or prepared food tax, which our restaurants have really pivoted quickly and they are surviving. They're down a little, but not anywhere near the rate that our hotels are seeing. And then, of course, the facility rentals are our third component of revenue, and that has gone to almost nothing.
Yeah. So what is Congress doing, do you think? There wasn't a whole lot of specific relief in that first CARES package that came through for your industry, other than payroll protection program, paycheck protection program. What's at work now, do you think, would be helpful?
Sure, so a couple of components. In the first CARES Act, there were some relief benefit through the PPP program for our independent businesses. Unfortunately, organizations like the DMO or Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, so far we have been eligible for zero support through the state or the federal funding. We're a quasi-government agency, and so we haven't been able to tap into any of that PPP or even the Arkansas Ready for Business programs for the PPE funding for all of the sanitization and that kind of thing. I think in the new CARES package, or HEALS package that they're calling it, that second round of PPP will be very important for a lot of our private industries. Right now, one of the proposals actually has organizations like ours eligible for that as well, and that would be a tremendous relief for us moving into
has to
this.
be. I mean, otherwise you're going to have to cut things to the bone.
And we have, unfortunately, early on, we had to furlough a significant number of our team members, and they're still on furlough. And it's just unknown when we're going to have the business to be able to bring those employees back, and without some additional funding support like those PPP programs, we may not be able to do that.
This gets to the core of what I think is going to be really the difficult tipping point for us. Is you've got the public health concern, and there's going to be guidelines that have to be met, and there may be some allowance for things to open back up, like we've seen things go from phase 1 to phase 2, for instance, but consumer demand might not be there for it because customers or consumers are still going to be hesitant about doing that. You can't really fix that problem, can you?
No, that's the, we really got to target those that do feel comfortable and want those kind of offerings. But then for us, we're still trying to provide a lot of things virtually for our local residents that make them feel comfortable. And some of that are, downloadable coloring book sheets and downloadable or digital jigsaw puzzles, so that we're reminding them of the things that we have in our own backyard for them to experience once they are comfortable coming out and doing so.
$7.4 billion question for you here. When do things return to normal? What's it going to take?
I wish I had a real answer for that, and unfortunately my answer literally changes daily with all of the research that we can get our hands on. It is definitely going to be a long and slow process. We have seen positive numbers coming back into the tourism industry from the hotel standpoint. Unfortunately, they literally hit rock bottom, and these positive numbers, we're seeing 2 and 3 point growth on occupancy and revenue each week. But when they started at 80% down in April, it's going to be a long, slow process. And from the group and convention booking standpoint, it may take another 12 months to really start seeing substantial number of group and large-scale events.